Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking about all sorts of things about Premodern. Got a bunch of decks today from a recent tournament in Spain, I believe. I'm not exactly sure where. I'm even taking Spanish, and I'm like, I don't even know what this means. So I'm like, not very good at Spanish apparently. That's okay, no biggie. So we're gonna be looking at some decks, kind of interesting stuff, a lot of good things to say, a lot of criticism. Oh, I'm gonna be so mean. But we're just gonna be hanging out. I got a Sapporo. That's right, I got a Sapporo today, not tomorrow. It's great. So that's pretty cool. I can pretend like I'm a samurai. I'm gonna pretend like I'm a samurai. That's gonna be really cool. Uh, yep, I'm LARPing as a samurai. Okay, so let's get on with this. Okay, so the tournament's called uh, Liga Madrilena de Premodern 2. So I think it's basically the second Premodern league in Madrilena. I guess that's the city. Almost kind of making it sound like the Madrid league. I don't know. Anyways, so I got these from decks from TC Decks. I'll have the put the link up on there in the description so you can go and look at them, check them out yourself, or you can just follow along with me and you can be surprised, see all the decks, and you won't have to, you know, you can be surprised. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. So we'll start at number 8, and we got a deck here that's pretty much most people are familiar with. Obviously, it's land still, and it's a pretty stock standard list for the most part. Looks pretty good. Not a lot you can really do with this deck. So many of the cards are kind of locked in, so to speak. Sideboard, you can. There's so many good sideboard cards, especially in this format. Honestly, very backbreaking, very powerful, very flexible stuff. So let's go ahead and look at the main deck again. Not much wonky here. Uh, well, a couple things. First off, 3 forbid. I like a singleton forbid, but multiple forbid doesn't actually make a lot of sense because the card's clunky, and if you have one forbid and you're actually using the buyback multiple times, like additional forbids are dead, right? It doesn't make any sense. So that's wonky. So I would drop the 2 forbid for 2 more impulse. I don't think this is a deck you can. I mean, impulse is so great. It really sets up your later turns, finds you exactly what you need. Digs 4 deep. I love it. Impulse is great. Triple forbid, not so much. So I'd probably be 1 forbid, 4 impulse. And then 2 stifle. Again, sometimes you see that in these standstill, landstill esque decks, esque landstill esque decks, where stifle is sometimes part of it as a 1 mana sinkhole. This is an additional land destruction, and of course it has lots of applications elsewhere, countering storm cards like Brain Freeze or all sorts of other random things. Pretty good against combo decks too. Um, and the mana base is a little bit different. With we have a 3 wasteland instead of just the normal 2 wasteland. I like playing 2 wasteland in a dust bowl. I think you get more out of like drawing like the dust bowl than say multiple wastelands, because dust bowl you can take care of any future lands that are being difficult for you. So yeah, if you want to, or I could even say like if you instead of just 2 wastelands, be a wasteland and a dust bowl. But anyways, that's mostly personal preference, I think. Um, and of course the sideboard, all sorts of good stuff here. The Hydroblast, which are basically a given in any blue deck. Gainsays, which is again great against the other blue decks, just 2 mana hard counter, and it's easier to cast. Dismantling Blow, Stifle, Powder Keg, Disenchant. Just stuff to switch around and bring in better cards and take out dead stuff and all that good stuff. Teferi's Response, this is a good one. This is great against, well, ports and all sorts of other land disruption. Wastelands. Pretty sweet card. Cop Red, again, great against, red decks. And Absorb. Nice to bring in against red decks. And just, again, nice card to bring in when you have other less efficient cards or other dead cards or whatever. So yeah, nothing too wonky here. This is a pretty stock list, pretty good. But yeah, just a couple changes, mostly just the taking out the extra forbid, which is just a little too clunky, for more impulse, which are just great. So being able to hold a counterspell on turn 2 or be able to impulse is pretty sweet. So let's go to the 7th place deck. All right, again, this is a pretty stock standard Devourer deck, but with Mox Diamond. Mox Diamond's pretty good. Definitely something I'd have to try out. Again, produces colorless mana. Excuse me, produces colored mana, which is pretty sweet, and its ramp, again, pretty sweet. And of course, it's an artifact for Tinker, also really sweet. So yeah, but everything else is standard. Typical Devourer deck. These seem to be doing pretty well. I don't think I've seen. They typically don't win the tournaments, but usually get into the top 8. They're pretty good decks, um, but not. I don't think it's what I would play if I was gonna play a combo deck. I'd probably play something like Full English Breakfast, which I'll have a video coming. I will have a video on that coming up soon. Um, Full English Breakfast. That'll be sweet. Even the sideboard for the Devourer deck that we're looking at here, stock, standard, good stuff. Nothing too wonky here. So, yep. Again, looks pretty good. Nothing too crazy. So, yep, that's this. So let's go to number 6. Again, here we go. We got another Landstill deck. And this one's even more stock than the last one. Of course, we got the 4 Impulse, which I love, like. That's pretty much standard. We got the man base is a little sneaky, a little tricky. Got some crazy stuff going on. Some stuff, I imagine the 2 floodplain instead of the 2 more flooded strand is just due to budgetary considerations, or they couldn't find flooded strands, so yeah, it should be 4 flooded strands. But other than that, you've got the Keldoran Outpost. Again, this is a sweet card. Basically, I mean, every turn, just like start producing tons of 1/1s, which will trade with aggro decks, or like against control decks, you'll just be able to amass an army, literally, of dudes, and beat them down with that, which is pretty sweet, pretty great. I mean, obviously, the only problem is you have to have a planes in play, but that's not too hard. So pretty sweet. I like the Keldoran Outpost tech. It's basically a 27th land, which is great. I like it. I'll have to try that. So that's pretty cool. Another man land ish kind of thing. Um, and then at the sideboard, again, we look at those Teferi's Response. That must be pretty good to protect your Keldoran Outpost with that. That must feel great. Whew. Oh boy, I like it. I like it. That's a pretty big blowout. Of course, Hydroblast, Light of Day, which I'm a big fan of. Like Light of Day against the black decks, pretty sweet there. Again, Tormod's Crypts, Gainsays, Disenchants, and another Wog. Really stock, even more stock than the last Landstill list, but I like it. The deck works, it has answers to everything. It's got lots of card advantage, lots of permission, great removal, swords. I mean, Powder Keg, I love the keg. Freaking keg me up every day. So let's look at number 5. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Now we got one of my favorite decks, of course, Goblins. This deck is again pretty sweet. Um, there's not exactly a standard list. I mean, there are cards that all of the decks play. For example, for War Chief, for Ringleader, for Pile Driver, for Matron, for Lackey, etc., etc. And there's a lot of flex spots in here, like the Goblin King. That's okay. That's an okay card. I'd probably play it. There's a lot of like red-green decks where you'd be able to use the Goblin King to mountain walk. You like that? Mountain walk past all their blockers and stuff, which is pretty sweet. Uh, Goblin Pyromancer can turn your random board of dudes into a lethal board of dudes very quickly, which is great. And no, obviously the Sharpshooter. That's standard, at least the one of. But the Tinkerer, I'm not a huge fan of it. I mean, I guess if you're expecting a lot of artifact decks and stuff, it's okay, but I'd probably still only play one and just really rely on sideboard cards. I don't think it's particularly good. It's a little slow and dirty. but um, a lot of these artifact-based decks don't have a ton of removal, so you can kill whatever important artifact or eat their eat their dude eat their dudes eat their artifact mana, stuff like that, like chromatic spheres, mox diamonds, all sorts of things. But yeah, the rest of the list is pretty standard. I'd probably take out the Tinkerers, and then just add another Fanatic. I think you'd always play 4 Fanatics and another Prospector. I like playing at least 2 Prospectors. 2 Prospectors always feels pretty good. But yeah, 4 Fanatics I think is just stock standard. It's so good being able to take out birds and elves and all sorts of other stuff. Mother of Runes, Quirion Rangers. I mean, all sorts of anything with 1 toughness that needs to die. This guy does it. And then Pyrokinesis and Lightning Bolt. I mean, I could see playing pretty much the Bolts main deck. It's pretty good. Have a little bit of extra removal, and you have more room in the pre-modern Goblin decks than say like some of the newer Goblin decks, say like in Legacy or Modern or something, solely because you don't play Aether Vial because it's not legal, obviously. So you have more room for non-Goblin cards. So you still have like 34 Goblin cards, even with like these random burn spells. So yeah, I could see playing Bolts main. I don't know if I like it or if I would do it. I think I'd rather just play like Duress and stuff main with a Black Splash, but depends. The mana base is a little wonky. Ancient Tomb is certainly a good card. They're only playing 1, which I think is the right number. It's either 0 or 1. Multiples are way too clunky and painful. This deck can be a little slow sometimes, especially against some of the other aggressive decks. So Ancient Tomb, the damage can actually hurt you. Ditto for Barbarian Ring. That should definitely be a mountain or another wasteland or something. I mean, this isn't a burn deck. We get our value from our creatures. We want pain-free mana if we're just playing mono red. So that Barbarian Ring should absolutely be a mountain. At least something else, a mountain or a wasteland or something. You really don't want to take any extra damage. The deck can be a bit slow when people are interacting you and killing your creatures and stuff like that. So yeah, Barbarian Ring, don't play it in Goblins. That's bad. But the rest of that, I mean, at least they're playing 23 lands. I don't know if I like 23 or 24 more, but you never want to play less than 23. That's just really bad. But for the sideboard looks good. Lots of good stuff in there. Sulfuric Vortex, kind of nice. You don't really care too much about life gain in this deck due to Pile Driver and I guess Goblin Pyromancer too, letting you attack for a quadrillion. But it is a nice way to attack other decks whilst being able to still do your thing normally, So another angle of attack and turning off life gain, kind of nice too. Boil, of course, against blue decks. Crash against anything with artifacts. Crypts, Flaring Pain, Anarchy, Red Blast, Blood Moon. Most of these are pretty standard cards you'd see in any red deck, and they all look pretty good. So yeah, pretty good deck. Like I said, I'd make a couple changes, but not much else I would change. So let's go ahead and look at number 4. All right, so we got basically a slide deck, and it's pretty good. I like the sideboard. Most of the main deck's good. Like I like all the creatures. I mean, those are standard: Mohawk Fanatic, Jackal Pup, Lavamancer, Ball Lightning, Fire Blast, Incinerate, Bolt for burn. A little bit changed up. So we have Flame Rift, which is a pretty good card. It just doesn't kill creatures, which I like to be able to, have my removal be a little bit more flexible. But obviously, this is a good card. A lot of decks have played this kind of card before. It's very, very strong, and since you'll pretty much always be the aggro deck in pretty much any matchup, it's pretty sweet. It can be awkward in the mirror, like if you get a slower start than they do, then your Flame Rift can be dead or deadly to you at least. So yeah, Flame Rift, pretty good. I like it. Yeah, it's definitely a slot that's kind of like a flex slot, I'd say. There's like 6 to 8 slots I think you could change on different burn spells or whatever. But Flame Rift is certainly a good one. Now, Sulfuric Vortex, obviously I love this card. I would play 1 to 2 in my 75 every time, always. I think you always should. I don't think it's negotiable. But playing 4 Sulfuric Vortex main deck even, you can't do it. This deck is surprisingly mana hungry, and that's just, I mean, you'll just get so many of these stuck in your hand, and it just makes you so slow and dirtily. It's not good. It's not good. I could see playing like one main deck and then one on the side, but I'd rather just play two on the side. Typically, yeah, it's a great card, but I mean, you can't really cast like your ball lightnings and your sulfuric vortexes and then your curse scrolls and also using fire blast and stuff. I mean, it works across purposes, right? Like you're just 2 mana hungry already, and it makes the deck a little too dirtly. So 2 and 75 are the one main deck, one sideboard, or two in the board. Not a huge fan of well, definitely would never play 4. That's too much. It's too much. It's too slow. It's not good. Because you want to really in the late game, you want to be activating your curse scroll basically every turn, in addition to playing whatever the heck you draw. You can't really do that with all these 3 mana cards clogging up your hand, which prevents you even from activating the curse scroll in the first place. So don't play too many dirtily cards. And then we also have another problem. So the land base is wonky. Um, I'm, I guess I'd say I'm ambivalent about the Forgotten Cave. I think it's probably okay to replace a mountain with a Forgotten Cave. That's fine. But playing 4 Barbarian Ring, again, this is going to cause you a lot of problems. A lot of the negative synergy with Flame Rift, so you'll just be taking extra damage to cast Flame Rifts, and like again in the mirror or other aggro mirrors that can cost you. I mean, literally, it can kill you. So that's not good. I like 1 to 2 Barbarian Rings, especially because of the negative synergy with Grim Lavamancer. They can be tough again, and all these extra Barbarian Rings makes it harder to ever use Fire Blast if you draw multiple Barbarian Rings and then your random Forgotten Cave and you have one mountain or something. Again, that's not good. You really want this deck to be consistent. That's why it's so good. Its cards are already strong enough. You don't really need to like try and milk all the damage you can out of them, like because you'll just end up losing more games than you win with all these extra barbarian rings against some of the more aggressive decks. So that's a problem. So I think the mana base in this deck is the biggest issue. I definitely cut down to like 2 barbarian rings, maybe change Forgotten Cave to a mountain. I mean, especially I would play like probably play 22 lands as I was playing all these 3 drops, but they're only playing 20, which is, yeah, this deck's kind of a little all over the place. So it's got a lot of stuff right, but it's a lot of stuff wrong. So yeah. Oh, and then also I guess I should say in the sideboard, Furnace and Crypt is also pretty good because it's probably better than just multiple Crypts or something. But against it's less useful against Reanimator because like again their biggest thing is just being very very fast. So if you're on like the play and you like okay I'll play my turn 1 like Phyrexian Furnace, they can still like put a bunch of crap in the graveyard and then reanimate something and you can't really do anything about it, which is bad. But it's pretty good with uh, Crypt and then Furnace because then you can just remove stuff pretty easily in the mid to late game. But anyways, yeah. Oh, and of course the Scald. I like Scald. That's interesting. So let's move on. Let's move on. Okay, now this deck is really sweet. So this is basically a sort of pre-modern version of the old vintage deck of Tools and Tubbies, which is basically TNT, which was an old survival deck that played like Goblin Welder and stuff like Juggernaut and things like that. Except this time we only have a couple good artifact creatures. So we have Triskelion, of course, and then also Phyrexian Colossus. And Colossus has very good synergy with Quirion Ranger, which is super sweet, and can untap it for free. I mean, this deck has a lot of really cool synergies. Of course, we've got the Enlightened Tutor to tutor for like our survival, but we also can get the Singleton Solitary Confinement, which is a hard lock with Squee, which is great. Then we have like all the artifact stuff like Tangle Wire and Sabo's Web and a Lotus Petal for mana fixing and just welding and stuff like that. Solid mana base lets us get all sorts of the mountains that we need for like anger, all the fetch lands, basic lands, and then the Singleton Cradle, which is very, ooh, excuse me, which is very good. Yeah, you got a lot of the same sort of survivalish stuff, like the Monk Realist and things like that, and the Anger and Genesis, Crows and Tusker, um, all sorts of good stuff. Shield Sphere, God, I can't even talk, is really great because it's again something you can weld out, and it's a great blocker, pretty sweet. And the sideboard has all sorts of awesome stuff. Again, Enlightened Tutor enables all sorts of cool sideboard choices. So you got Elfin Grass, Seal of Cleansing, um, Defense Grid, Null Rod, Winter Ward, Tormod's Crypt, Choke, all sorts of things that you can get with Enlightened Tutor. And then we have Naturalize and Reverent Silence for like stuff like Enchantress and all the artifact-based decks. So this deck is really really cool. I'm always excited like how people just like the ingenuity of like a lot of the deck builders in this format. There's always new stuff, even though it's like basically a quote unquote solved format. There's all sorts of new things popping up that, all sorts of new interactions, especially for these survival decks, because like survival is banned late 90s, or was it 2000, something like that. Um, and so it didn't get to play with a lot of these newer cards or whatever. So this is pretty cool. I like it. It's a really cool deck list. Really sweet. I mean, a lot of really powerful sideboard cards, lots of tutoring, all the good stuff. The only thing I'd probably change, I'd probably want to squeeze in a Masticore, like with all these random dorks and Gaia's Cradles and stuff. And really just chew through stuff. And it's another discard outlet, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan. But yeah. So let's move on to the next deck. Yeah. So a lot of these last couple decks are pretty sweet. So recently, Frantic Search got them banned. So what we have here is one of the best decks to use Frantic Search. Deck that wants to actually use like all of its mana. So being able to untap your lands after Frantic Search is pretty sweet. So you can go like Frantic Search into like a Replenish on turn 4 or something. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Again, this is just a Replenish deck that's, the old Opalescence style of decks, which is really great because, you don't have any wonky dead cards. You can hardcast your stuff too if need be, which is pretty nice, especially against Graveyard Hate, things like that. A lot of really good draw spells like Careful Study and, of course, the aforementioned Frantic Search. And then good tutors, Enlightened Tutor, Intuition, of course. Then you got Squee with Solitary Confinement, which can be a lock pre-board against a lot of decks. And then you have all sorts of like just really powerful enchantments that are good just to cast on their own. Parallax Wave and Parallax Tide. A lot of really cool stuff here. This deck is pretty sweet. I like it a lot. The only thing I'd really change, probably try and fit a City of Traders or two in. It's pretty cool, pretty cool. A little bit, because this deck can obviously use all of its extra mana, and of course, having good synergy with Frantic Search. So, the sideboard got good stuff. Again, Enlightened Tutor helps enable all sorts of cool sideboard cards. So, Defense Grid, Null Rod, again, makes sense. Defense Grid against Counter Magic, Null Rod against other combo decks and the Tinker decks and stuff like that. Crypt, Parallax Tide, Seal of Cleansing, and of course Blue Blasts. Pretty great. So yeah, this deck's really cool. I like it a lot. Lots of great stuff going on here. I'm a big fan. But even the first place deck, oh man, this deck is sweet. This one's gonna be good. Okay, so we actually got a parfait list. This is the first time I think I've seen a parfait deck. I mean, obviously there's always tons of different tax rack decks, but this is the first time I've seen parfait in particular actually be played at all. It might have been played before, but I just didn't see it. At least since I made my parfait video, which is like forever ago. I think it was about a year ago or so. Mm-hmm. Sounds about right. But this one's not cherry parfait, it's blueberry parfait. So we got Blue Splash in the main deck for Back to Basics and Propaganda. Very powerful cards. Obviously, Back to Basics is back-breaking against so many decks in this format. Really powerful. Again, Propaganda, same thing, especially against a lot of these land light aggressive decks, and it actually combos pretty well with Armageddon too. Pretty nice. Um, Everything else is pretty standard for the most part. Singleton Ivory Tower, Soldevi Digger, Crypt, Zernorb, all sorts of good stuff. Argivian Find. I don't think Parfait typically played in Armageddon, although obviously Armageddon's pretty strong, especially with you having a bunch of extra lands, and then of course Mox Diamonds. So yeah, pretty sweet. Orm's Chant, great anti-combo card. I think my list I played like Abeyance, but obviously Chant's very good. Of course, Swords to Plowshares. It's a pretty good card, pretty good. And only one Plane of Birth. Um, the only thing I would change is the mana base, so maybe like add an Undiscovered Paradise. Ooh, excuse me. Yeah, Undiscovered Paradise would be good. Helps enable casting your blue cards. Of course, and it enables land tax. And then I would probably take out like 2 planes for 2 more Flooded Strand. Yep. So yeah, it gives you better access to your islands more consistently, and there's really no drawback. I mean, to playing more Flooded Strands. Um, I mean, yeah, it's perfect. So, and then the sideboard, again, all sorts of cool stuff. Island Sanctuary is an interesting one that I haven't really thought about before. That one's pretty sweet. That's basically like a 2-mana pseudo moat, unless they have like a Island Walker or a Flyer, I think. And then we've got Shield Sphere. That's an interesting one, I guess, just for cheap early blockers. And then Null Chamber, which can stop them from playing particular cards to answer your stuff, like you could name Tranquility or Reverent Silence or Pulverize or Meltdown or something like that. But yeah, this is actually pretty sweet. I like the blue splash. There's tons of. I was trying to think of the other good blue cards I'd play. I'd probably play maybe another Back to Basics and a Propaganda in the sideboard. Maybe another Propaganda and the main deck, just because it seems like there's a lot more like creature-based stuff. Even something like Landstill, Propaganda is good against, is that it makes it much more costly for them to try and attack you. Um, yeah, lots of really good stuff here. Really cool deck. Not really surprised at one, because I mean you can literally deal with anything. Very powerful draw engine, tax racket, goes into tons of different decks. Pretty sweet. Um, yeah, I like it. Sacred Mesa make horsies or Pegasus. Yeah, they're Pegasus, right? Because they have wings, duh, because they fly. Um, but yeah, I like it. Looks really good. So these are all the decks that I saw at the this most recent tournament in Spain. I'm guessing it's Spain, right? um, but yeah, a lot of interesting deck lists, a lot of new tech, a lot of interesting things to chew on and mull over. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, a lot of interesting things in all these different decks. I like them. I like them a lot. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for today. I saw so many things about all these different decks, and I wanted to talk about them a little bit. And I'm like, man, this is really cool, and I wanted to only talk about maybe a couple, but then there was just so many different things. I was like, man, I need to talk about all this stuff because there's some new interesting tech in some of these lists. So yeah, yeah, pretty good, pretty good. So I hope you enjoyed this, guys. Like I said, I'll put the link in the description so you can check them out yourself, and of course they have a lot of other pre-modern results up there too. So yep, that's it. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a nice day.